Hi guys, what's up and welcome back to my channel. I know I've been away for a little while, and trust me when I say this, I've been trying to sit down and film this video for a few weeks now, but personal life just gets in the way and there are some things going on which I will share with you when the time is right. But for now, I'm just so happy to be back, to be sitting down with you, and just be back to talking about things that are really important and relevant. And you need to know this about the pageant industry right now. Miss USA is less than a month away. And today I want to talk about a few things that nobody really tells you about preparing for a national competition. Your general pageant prep tips and tricks and interview formulas, none of that matters. None of that is going to be useful if you don't know these things, because this is the difference between winning a state pageant versus a national pageant. And this is exactly what I want to share with you. There are state title holders who were selected through the Miss USA open call for the first time in history, and these women got less than 30 days to prepare for their nationals. And when you have that kind of short timeline and you have really big goals, it's important that you look at the larger picture and not just do what every other candidate is going to be doing. And these are the things that are going to distinguish a contestant from a competitor. So let's dive straight into it. First things first, you're competing for a national pageant. So what the judges are looking for is obviously going to be different this time than what they were expecting from you at the state level. And this time, the judges are looking for national relevance. Now, this is something that I work with my clients really early on, because a lot of the times women who are about to compete in a pageant and are looking to be able to make a difference when they're planning out their brand, their advocacy, their platforms, they are thinking of how to make the most impact in the community around them. And while that does help you win till state pageants, it doesn't work when you go nationals. And that's why it's important to start thinking of your end goal even before you've begun competing. And so this time, the judges at nationals are looking for relevance of your platform at a national level. And also here, they're selecting the women who's going to go on and compete and represent this country internationally. So the platform that you talk about, or the issues that you stand up for, whatever you advocate for, it needs to really be able to resonate with masses at an international level alone. And so many contestants often forget, and their issues, however genuine and beautiful of a cause it is, if your impact is limited to the town, the city, or just your community in general, and it can't be scaled up, that kind of thing can hold you back from winning nationals. And so scalability is such a crucial factor to be considered when you're building your advocacy and platform work. And that's one of the things you want to look at. You want to look at what kind of national organizations can you partner with, what kind of communities, how would you make your message be able to resonate with an audience. Now, if you're a state title holder and you're looking at your advocacy and platform and thinking that I don't really see it resonating with a national level audience, this doesn't mean that you have to go back and undo everything you've done so far. Of course, your confidence comes from the achievements that you've had so far, the community service hours that you've spent, and authenticity is also important. And for that, you want to be truly be able to talk about the things that matter. And you don't have to become a different person just because you're competing at nationals. But this is where strategy comes in, where you're going to tweak the messaging so that it can resonate with a national audience. And so make sure that your brand feels relevant, because after all, and this is more specifically for Miss USA, but they are looking for a strong media personality and who can also make headlines in national newspapers and national TV news channels. And what she talks about, would people want to interview her on national television? And if your platform, if your messaging just feels like it's more suited to a local community, this is something to think about. The second thing that you want to focus on if you're going from state to nationals, and this is not just something that you can just step it up or up your game, that general kind of advice isn't going to work. But the harsh truth is that when you go for national competitions, potential alone isn't going to be enough. And I say that because when you're competing at state, It varies how many competitors you had. Some women won in a group of 5 to 10 women. Others who come from bigger states had a much larger competition. She perhaps won from 50, 60, or sometimes even 200 women were competing from a single state. So already these women come from different experiences. But now at nationals, it's a level, even ground for everybody. All of these women have a lot of achievements. They've all got the state title. What is now going to distinguish you if you want to win at the national level is a couple of things you should be focusing on. Is you have to make sure that everything really ties together. At state level, you having the skills in being, let's say, a good public speaker, you having a lot of community service hours, all of those things, even separately, might have been the reasons judges selected you. And of course, they saw you at, as someone who has potential to be at Miss USA. But now with the playing field that you're in, potential alone isn't going to be enough. This is where you have to make sure you've got strategy. It's all connected. So you want to look at, does my paperwork sound like me? It's the voice and the tone in the words that if someone's reading it, what kind of person do they imagine? And does that resonate with the kind of person I am? Does that resonate with my personality? Or does that sound like a different woman, right? Not in terms of the content and the information, but is the voice mine? That's one thing that really makes a big difference at nationals. The other thing is you want to have consistency in your messaging. You being a great speaker and you having a lot of interesting stories is great, but when it comes to nationals and the interview process, you can't just wing it. You want to make sure that in those 5 minutes, you make sure that you get across the most important pointers that you have. You're doing enough of your practice interviews. You're making sure that you don't have this sense of discomfort if it comes down to you having to repeat yourself, which is something I've noticed in a lot of clients of mine, that sometimes women feel this pressure to give new, unique, and interesting answers, even though it's not really something that ties back to their personal brand, but she just feels uncomfortable saying the same thing over and over again. And that's exactly what you need to do at nationals. There needs to be consistency, and sometimes that means being repetitive because you don't want to change your answer. You wouldn't change the answer to what do you advocate for at national level. And so it's important that you're building trust. And another thing you have to keep in mind is also how ready are you for the stage after the national competition? Because if you look at specifically just Miss USA, there is not that much time left between Miss USA and Miss Universe. And so the judges at Miss USA are going to be looking for, is she ready to just go and compete at Miss Universe? It's not just about whether or not you have the potential to be a Miss USA or whether you deserve to be Miss USA. What judges are going to be looking for is your crown readiness. Is she ready to compete at Miss Universe? And so you need to be thinking long term. You need to be working your brand, your social media, what you're doing in your life outside of pageantry, the kind of connections that you have, your resources, the kind of events that you show up to, appearances, and portraying yourself as the media personality that would do an amazing job representing USA and is also really prepared for what Miss Universe needs. This would also mean that you have extreme clarity in your message. And so the answer to why should you win Miss USA at this stage, it should be something that you know better than the back of your hand. You should be able to articulate your purpose, your plan, the proof that you have to back things up, your elevator pitch about your platform, your mission statements, just these sentences, these phrases. It's material that every single client of mine has prepared when they're going to the competition. And so in terms of how you're preparing for nationals, these should just be statements that you see all the time around you. You're talking about this to your friends, your family members, anybody you meet, because this is not something that you're just saying for the judges. You're actually that person, and that's what your personal brand is. And so it should just be something so easy that if you walk into any networking event, the pageant being one of them, you know how to introduce yourself and you know what your messaging is, who you're speaking to. The third thing that you can expect and should be prepared for when it comes to nationals is that this competition now is no longer just about how much you've prepped, but it's also so much about the mental endurance that you have, because Most state pageants were probably 1 or 2 days long, and for a lot of the title holders who got in through the open call, as much as you've been doing behind the scenes work, you haven't been in the pageant in person. And there's so many things that you haven't planned for can come up. And this is where being really strong mentally, being able to push through even after a bad day, being able to reset your mindset no matter what happens around you, what people are saying about you, what you've heard other women talk about. Maybe you're hearing things that are making you doubt your worth, shaking your confidence. This is where it becomes really important how good your blinders are, how good are you at setting boundaries, at protecting your mental peace. And so make sure that you have those exercises as a part of your routine and that you're building mental endurance for what could possibly be a week-long pageant, and if you win, then even longer. And besides mental endurance, you probably also want to work on your physical endurance. And of course, every pageant contestant is sweating out in the gym and getting her body ready for the swimwear round. And that's something every woman is already doing. But something I've seen happen time and again is that you're so used to having your 8 hours of sleep that as soon as that changes when you go to the pageant, which is of course going to be extremely hectic, like most pageants, and women who are not used to or don't know how to function without their routine, they really take a hit, and sometimes that becomes the reason your performance is being affected. And while I hope that doesn't happen at Miss USA and just things are done in a way that women who are competing are being taken care of, there is no denying the fact that pageants can be extremely hectic, and I haven't seen contestants getting 8 hours of sleep in most national pageants. And so you need to be ready for that, and that's also a part of the training that I think more and more women should be incorporating. You don't want to drain your energy or be tired before the competition even began, but you need to have built your endurance in a way that if you're not getting enough rest and enough sleep, how long can you keep going? And that is why most contestants kind of get exhausted and fatigued and just cranky, I'm gonna say, by day 3. But the women who end up winning have that same energy level even at day 7. And my clients who have struggled with this have often come to me and asked, like, how did she do it? How was she not sleep deprived by the end of the competition, even though they all had the exact same schedule? And so that goes on to show that the person who was winning was preparing differently, and they weren't just preparing their speech, their answer, and their walk sequence, but they were also preparing for the stamina and the endurance that this is going to need. The fourth thing that I recommend to women who are competing at nationals, and this is a conversation that came up with a client of mine who was competing at Miss Universe India, is this balance between following instructions and also being a leader that comes in when you're a national finalist. There are so many contestants who want to be exactly what the pageant is looking for. And of course, this pageant and their leaders, the ownership, like the team is looking for someone who's easy to work with. But at the same time, they want you to have your own opinion, have your own personality, and not just be a yes sir kind of person. Because when you are too obedient, I'm gonna say, for lack of a better word right now, is when you're following instructions to the T, and when you're just really good at, like, I'm gonna do everything right. What also tends to happen sometimes in these cases, this was happening to a client of mine, is that it's difficult to see you as a leader and as a title holder, just because of the dynamic that you kind of always have, no matter who you meet. Because you're in the competition, you tend to show up in this energy that you have to tell me what to do and I will do whatever you say. But that doesn't really work, especially at national pageants. And this is where you do want to obey instructions, you do want to follow instructions, you don't want to be a rebel, but you also need to show up like a leader and not ask, say, permission for everything, or the kind of questions that you ask make a big difference. Does she ask questions like a leader, or she asks questions like a follower on an employee? And there's a big energy difference between those two. And so being mindful of how you are perceived when you're asking questions, when you're around people who are decision makers and are at the top of the pageant organization, you want to just be mindful of how you're showing up and how are you being perceived. And get feedback from your friends, your family, your coaches on even this thing, which is not something that we really talk about when it comes to the standard pageant prep. And lastly, I want to emphasize the fact that when it comes to national pageants, the women who reach till nationals, their lives and the women themselves are far more interesting than the pageant itself. And that's how you become one of the potential spokespersons of the brand. The same doesn't happen at state. In state, everybody is approaching it like an examination. It's like, we just have to focus on the pageant prep. I've got my daily routine life going on. And then the pageant is something that I want to try, I want to win. But when you go to nationals, I always say this, one way to really approach a national pageant, or any pageant for that matter, is to think of it as a women's leadership conference and not necessarily as a pageant competition, because that can really help you get out of your head and just look at things differently. And then you're no longer looking at your co-contestants as competitors, but you're genuinely looking to connect with them and make friendships and just connections that will last you longer than the pageant itself. And so if you're at the stage where you've got your nationals pageant coming up, as overwhelming as that might be, I want you to remember to also take out time for things other than the pageant in your day, and make sure that that's a necessity and not an afterthought. Because by the time you reach the pageant, if all you've done in the last 20-30 days is think about the pageant, that also kind of starts to reflect in your conversations and the kind of thoughts that you have, because you didn't let your human body and your brain actually think about anything but that. And yes, it's important to be that crazy about a goal and that passionate, but your personality cannot be that she's a pageant girl, and that kind of personality is just simply not interesting enough to win a national pageant. And which is why it's important to be building your brand outside of the pageant goal as well. So if you're headed to nationals, these are the 5 points I want you to keep in mind, because this is what differentiates the contestants and finalists from the woman who walks away with the crown at national level and gets to represent USA at Miss Universe. I hope you found this video super helpful and that you enjoyed watching this kind of content. If this is your cup of tea, then don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up and also subscribe to my channel so that you get notified of future videos. That being said, I love you guys so much, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!